Hi everybody, Whitney with Girl Friday Crafts here. Welcome to Craft With Me Friday. A little bit of a different setup today. Decided to go with just the one camera, play around with this and see if I can keep this camera angled enough for you to be able to see my hands and periodically see my face. Not that I mind with two cameras. I was having technical difficulties today getting that to work, so I decided to still go through with it. Just do this. So once again, I am coming to you with a project I have never done before. Why I like to do that and put myself in these situations, but I mean, it's kind of fun, and it gives you an opportunity to, maybe learn a little bit how not to do something the first time around. So this is something that I saw at ChalkCon in June. One of the sessions was about paper crafting and chalk. And paper crafting is how I got started really in the craft space, card making, scrapbooking, and then it just led to everything else. If you don't count the fact that my mom taught me how to cross stitch when I was like 9, which I do count, but this paper crafting is really where my passion for being crafty and making things really came to light. And being able to incorporate chalk into paper crafting is something that I've done before, but I haven't done a lot of videos around it or anything like that. And so that ChalkCon session kind of got me inspired. You can chalk on cardstock, scrapbook paper, anything like that. But because of what we're going to do today, I'm actually going to use chalk suede. So these are the Chalk Couture chalk suede cards. You can also get just sheets of chalk suede paper. I have a whole bunch of these cards, so I figured I would use them because that way if I mess a whole bunch of them up, I'm not going to worry about it too much. And we're also going to be using oxide ink. Now I have the Distress Oxide, which gives things a bit more of an antique-y look. Regular oxide ink is a little bit thicker. I don't have a whole lot of colors, so I am trying to do designs that kind of go with the colors that I have. I have Broken China, which is a blue, Black Soot, which is black, and Fired Brick, which is a red. So I'm limited there. And we're going to do two things. We're going to use blending brushes and sponge daubers to apply the oxide ink to a transfer onto the chalk suede paper. And then we're also going to use the oxide inks as a background to chalk on. So we're going to do a little bit of both of those things today, and I'm hoping that they're going to work the way I want. I honestly don't have the best luck in chalking on chalk suede paper. I think I just don't fuzz my transfers enough. So we're going to work on that today. You can wax this surface, but it leaves kind of a sheen on the card, and I don't like how that looks. So we're going to start with something simple. I have the, what is this one called? Liquid Optimism transfer. And you've got two phrases. You've got liquid optimism, and there's a chance this is wine. So we're going to use there's a chance this is wine. I'm going to cut this off the backing sheet. I hope everybody is doing good today. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate your time. Got that sing-songy thing going in my vocal cadence today, so we're going to try and get rid of that because it kind of makes me cranky, and I don't know why I do it. So most of you, if you've watched my videos before, you know that I leave my backing sheet intact and just cut the transfer off. That was a little bit easier than some of the other transfers because it's smaller and had a nice just straight cut line. Now I buzz something, defuzz something usually 6 to 8 times. I'm going to do this quite a few more times than that, which also means I need to count. So give me 1 second. Okay. Now we're going to use the oxide ink first. So I'm not necessarily going to be using chalk paste. But even still, the chalk suede paper and the transfers really like to adhere to each other. And so when I chalk on it, I often have problems getting the transfer to pull up without pulling up my paste. Now, for those of you who have not seen a chalk video before, the process that I was just doing, putting the transfer on this cloth and pulling it up, that's called defuzzing or fuzzing. This is a fuzzing cloth, so it's fuzzing. And what that does is it makes the back of the transfer a little less sticky so that when you are chalking, you don't pull up paste when you pull up the transfer. How much you have to do it depends on the surface that you're chalking on, depends on how old the transfer is and how many times you've used it, a variety of things. So it is a bit of a learning process to figure out what works for you and the project that you're working on. So I'm going to get this ink and my blending brush. I'm just going to take my blending brush across the ink pad. Probably should have used the white brush so I could see. And then we're just going to apply the ink to the transfer. Just kind of in a circular motion there. I'm starting at the bottom with the chance there is wine, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up a little bit with this red, and then I'm going to blend in some black as I get closer to the top. Now, these inks are, I want to say layerable. That's not really a word. The more you add layers of the ink, the darker the color will get. Now, the oxide inks are going to be light anyway. That's just the nature of the ink. So I'm going over this, there's wine multiple times, kind of leaving there's a chance with just one layer. Or actually, I just did a chance. I didn't even go over. There is. So that's what it looks like so far. And then I'm going to get some of the black. I'm going to try one of these sponge daubers and see how this works. Now, the nice thing about the inks is you don't have to worry about them drying. It's not going to hurt anything. You're not going to get any, ink. There's going to be ink stains on your transfer, but it's not going to like clog your negative space or anything like that. So I'm going to use the sponge dauber. I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the blending brush. I'm just going to run it over the color. And I'm just trying this just to see, like, is there a difference? Do I like the blending brush better? Do I like the dauber better? And we're just going to run it over. And then I'm going to go into that area with a chance where I did the red just a little bit with the black so that the colors kind of bleed together there. Now, again, I've never done this before. I've only seen it done. So as I pull this transfer off, I have absolutely no idea what to expect. I'm going to pull this up slow if I can get a good grip on it. like I would if I was chalking, just so that I don't stretch my transfer. Okay. So what I can tell you is that I did not use enough ink, right? Because you can't really see any of that. Okay, so I'm actually going to just lay this back down. We are going to use a blending brush for the black. What's this one? And I'm going to go over this again. Okay. And, you know, this for me right now is just all about experimentation. Well, that's okay. Now, the other thing is that I have not used these inks in a while. So obviously there's always the possibility of them getting a little dried out. I do try to store my inks bottom side upside down so that the ink runs through the pad as opposed to towards the bottom of the container. But even doing that, there's a chance that they dry out. Okay. I'm going to go back over that black a little more. I feel like I got more ink on the sponge dauber than on the blending brush. I don't know if that's because my black is starting to dry out. So I am going to use that again and try to get some of this ink through the transfer. Now the red was coming through. I didn't pull the transfer all the way off, but the red was coming through. And so that might have just been a layering issue, or I wasn't layering enough. There we go. That worked. That's looking better. Still may not be exactly what I wanted, but I can see the black ink coming through. If your transfer sticks and you're pulling it up, you can kind of rock it back and forth a little bit. Okay, drop this in water bath here. Get some of that ink off. I'll show you all what that looked like. Okay, so that actually came through. It just took a little work. You know, that black's not necessarily as dark as I might like it to be, but part of that is because it's probably because it's oxide ink, and it's also the distress oxide, which even has a little bit of a lighter finish. So that is that one. We're gonna try that again with a different transfer. Actually, I'm just going to use the back of this one. Should fit. That whole thing won't fit. This is the fun transfer. And this one's cool because you can layer these on top of each other and you can kind of create a 3D effect, which we can also actually do with this. because you're using these inks and not using paste, it doesn't really matter as much if you're not washing the transfer in between and layering it. Sorry, can't talk today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this just completely intact, but I might need actually my backer sheet. And we're going to start with this bottom layer. And I'm using the backer sheet to stick this on where it's going to overlap the card so that it doesn't stick to my mat here. Okay. And so I'm going to try the black again, just with the blending brush, just to see, people have preferences. Some people don't really like blending brushes. Some people don't like the sponge daubers. So it really just sort of depends on whether or not you have a preference. And then, you just sort of play around with it to see if you can make it work. I'm just sort of rubbing that black in. And we're just going to pull this up a little bit to see if I got that black to go through. And it looks like it did pretty well. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to take this and I'm going to lay this down maybe on top of where I had the black. I'm going to use this 3D effect to our advantage here, and I'm going to use my, this is called Broken China. This is the Tim Holtz oxide, distress oxide. And I'm going to go over this one, and if this does what I'm hoping, then this will fill in the blue with the black looking like a shadow. And you can do this with, the chalk paste and the chalk ink. And you don't necessarily, if you can work quickly, you don't necessarily have to, wash the first part before you go on to the second. However, you're going to want to let the paste dry. So the kind of advantage of this is I don't have to do any of that. I don't have to let the ink dry. I don't have to let, anything dry. I can just immediately move on and, get this whole thing done. Okay. So we are going to pull that up. Yay. I'm going to drop this in my water bath real quick. I will show you what that looks like. And y'all can't see it, but as I put that in the water bath, that ink is just coming off right off of my transfer. So that's what that looks like. That's super cute. Now, I ended up going up a little too high, so I've got some of the edges of the transfer on there. So if you used like a smaller blending brush, you wouldn't necessarily have that problem. So that's great. Like I would absolutely do that for a scrapbook page, for a title, or for a card or something like that. I mean, this one too, that'd be a great card. Now here's my struggle, and this is what I'm going to have to play with. I don't like white card bases. So when I make cards, even when I use a white card base, I tend to layer on colored or patterned scrapbook paper. So for me, this would be doing this on top of cardstock or scrapbook paper, or doing the technique that I'm getting ready to do next. And you can do that, but you definitely need to wax or fuzz really, really, really well when you're talking on paper. And so not and when you're using even just the transfer. So even if I was just using the transfer and the oxide ink on cardstock or patterned paper, I would still need to fuzz that transfer really well. Otherwise, it's going to tear the paper when it comes up. Okay. So this next technique then is for folks like me who don't necessarily like a white card base. Or again, you want to add some color to a scrapbook page. And we're going to do this, and we're going to use this cutie patootie little teacups transfer. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm trying to figure out which acrylic block I'm going to use here. Probably this one. And what color do I want as my background? I'm going to use probably do some blue and black actually. Okay, so we're going to take the oxide ink and we're going to spread it on our acrylic block. Okay. And then we are going to spritz it just a smidge of water. And you're going to take it and you're just going to drag it down the card. Okay. So that gives me that, sort of design there, right? So I'm going to do that again. I have a bigger block that would have covered the whole entire area, but I kind of wanted something that I could control a little bit better. Drag it down like that. And to be honest, probably should have turned it over so I could get some more down on the bottom. But I mean, you can use the block and kind of swirl it all around. Right? Okay, so I'm going to wipe that block off, set it to the side. And then I'm going to dry this with my drying tool just a little bit. I'm going to, be careful with the drying tool, obviously. And I'm not going to dry it completely just yet. We're going to put another layer of the oxide ink on in this broken china. And so I want that a little wet still so that it kind of smears around. So I'm going to take a little bit of a smaller block and I'm just going to get some ink on it. And just a little bit of water. And then we're going to take it and just spread it across that black, right? And there was enough water still on there that I didn't necessarily need to even spritz it a second time. I just got a little bit more ink on it, and it was still wet enough in and of itself. So the next thing we're going to do is, let's have a little accident over there, is we're going to chalk on this with this teacup transfer. But this needs to be nice and dry before we do that. So I am going to dry this with the drying tool. And I'm trying to hold it at an angle into the light so I can see it. Try not to get the drying tool too close so that it doesn't burn anything. But also close enough so that it actually dries the ink. And much like paste or paint, if you hold it at the angle, you can kind of see it. Now what it looks like to me is that my outer edges of that are still wet. Which they are. But because we are creating smudgy things, you can also take a paper towel. Now, taking that paper towel did change what it looked like a little bit. That you don't see the chalk suede card as much. It doesn't have that kind of ripple effect, for lack of a better phrase. But it's wiping off what's wet. Probably, honestly, best to set this aside and let it dry. So if I'd really been thinking about it, I would have tried this yesterday, made this card, set it aside, showed you all how to make it, and then had one already dried to chalk on, which I think is actually what Gretchen did in her class. Put this down on here for a second. I don't want to wipe it because I don't want to smear that any more than it already is. But of course now I have paper towel imprints in there. But again, this is really just about the practice with the technique. Really, the finished product's going to look like what the finished product looks like. And that's not really what this is about today. Now, as I work with this technique, which I will absolutely continue to do, and sort of expand on the finished product, I will, come back and do more videos and show you all, like, okay, do it this way, do it that way. You can do this with this and this with that. So we're going to use the whole teacup. Nope, the whole teacup set won't necessarily fit. but it's okay. We'll use 2 of them. And I'm not going to cut this apart, but I am going to fuzz the heck out of it. Sorry, I'm counting. So trying to get, honestly, about 15. And we're going to use chalk paste on this. What I'm wondering too, which I might do, let's see, about 30 minutes in, we might try, or I might try in a different video so that I can do this and give it time to dry, is you could put the transfer down and ink on top of this background that you've created. Now, you would probably not want to use like a black in the background so that the oxide ink would show. And you want to make sure that you've got, a good color scheme for your inks to be able to show up. Okay. So we're going to put this right there. And again, this background that I've created doesn't really go, like, that doesn't really look like something you would put teacups on, but I wanted a smaller transfer because I wanted it to fit, and it was one I just happened to have handy, so I just grabbed it. The session that Gretchen did during our ChalkCon was doing this with some Halloween stuff. So she had an orange and a green and a purple and a black oxide ink, and it looked super cool. And she actually created a scrapbook page. So she used a 12 by 12 chalk suede sheet, and then used the oxide inks and made a background. And then in the autumn release that is live on July 9th, it has these round transfers that fit perfectly on our coasters, but they also work with like a 3.5-inch punch. And so she chalked those out of chalk suede paper and punched them out and then made them as embellishments for her scrapbook page. It was really, really cute. And that's kind of what got me thinking about, wanting to try this out. Now I need a smallish bear squeegee because I'm not doing all of the teacups. And so I want to just get right in this, this line right here. I want to do that very carefully. So this is one of our tools. It's not the detail tool. I forget what it's called. Multi-tool, maybe. Maybe the other one's the multi-tool and this is the detail tool. But it has this smaller squeegee edge on it. And it's good for doing exactly what I need to do right now. So I'm just going to go along the edge at the top here. I'm trying to pick some bright colors that are really going to show up on top of these oxide ink colors that I chose. Well, not that I chose. I only have 3 colors, so kind of limited. I wasn't thinking about that. I should have thought about that earlier this week and gotten some more. I have quite, few of Tim Holtz ink colors, but not necessarily the oxide ink. So, okay. And I'm going to use this larger transfer just to do the rest of it. you want to try to go all in one direction when you're chalking, either up or down or left to right. Sometimes I'm bad about switching that around. If I am trying to avoid getting a certain color in a certain place on the transfer, I try to chalk away from it. So got this other teacup at the bottom here, and I don't want to get this yellow on it. So I'm trying to chalk away from it as I get the bottom of this yellow one. Same with like trying to chalk along the edge of a transfer. Now, part of me wants to do my paste and pull method here because it looks like that yellow is already starting to dry, and I know if that happens, it's going to come up. And if you go slow, you can sometimes catch if you missed a spot, which it looked like I did. Now this is coming up pretty easily, but no, maybe that's just the transfer. Okay, so that worked okay. Honestly, having the ink there to chalk on is probably helping because the transfer is adhering to the ink, not the chalk suede paper. And then we are going to, I'm going to use berry for this one at the bottom. Let's see. No, that's like too much yellow still on it. Let's use this. This should be okay. Carefully along the edge here. Try not to mix in with the yellow, but make sure that I get the complete edge of this little teacup. So we have a transfer that says, would you like an adventure first or tea? The J.M. Barrie, it's a J.M. Barrie quote. I think it's from Peter Pan. And people have used that with this little teacup transfer, and it's so cute. I really want to do something, like that with both of those together. Okay, I'm going to pull that up. I'm going to drop that in. And to put that down. Sorry, I don't mean to be, okay. Just making sure. My husband had texted me earlier and asked me a question. I answered it, and I'm just trying to make sure there wasn't a follow-up. Okay, so there is that. Hold it up pretty close. So, again, my color schemes don't necessarily go together and don't necessarily quote unquote match each other in terms of like a theme. But really, this was all about the technique. I am going to do this again and record it. And what I want to do then is I want to put the oxide ink on the chalk suede paper, and I want to let it dry overnight and then come back and chalk on it. And what I'll do then is I'll make sure everything kind of goes together. So I'll decide on the transfer that I want to use. I'll make sure I have the right kind of oxide colors that I want. And then I'll show you kind of what it looks like when that texturizing or that oxidation, what am I trying to say? When that when that background stays the way it looked originally when I applied the ink, as opposed to it kind of smearing together more than I wanted because I had to try and dry it a little bit. And then what we'll also do is we will try that same technique to create the background, but then we'll use a transfer and use oxide ink to apply the transfer to the background. So I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit because we'll need to make sure we have really light background colors. And really dark or really bright chalk colors or for the background, and then really dark or bright ink colors, oxide ink colors for the transfer, so that it'll pop. Okay, so that was a lot of fun. So here's again, this is the cards with applying the transfer with the oxide ink. I will put a product list in the description. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions. If you try this out, let me know. Share pictures. I would love, love, love to see that. And definitely look for another video doing some similar stuff. Just sort of playing with it a little more and trying some new things with it. So thanks for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you next week.